That is absolute nonsense, Peter.
You didn't write that column
position
in
on Israel was made clear in the 2013 column, and to call me equivalent with people who are murdering Jews is insanity. It's beyond insulting. And if there's anybody who's emboldening Hamas to kill more children, it is you, because it's your policies which have emboldened Hamas. They know that people like you are going to get on American television and talk about how the Palestinians are meek victims, and whenever they fire rockets, it can be justified by Israeli policy. Hamas celebrates every moment you're on television.
It's impossible to have this conversation, obviously, without some level of inflammatory rhetoric.
Well, the problem is twofold here. One is what's actually being taught in certain ethnic studies classes, which tends to be on a myopic focus on the idea that America is a racist place against certain ethnicities and minorities. The second point here is just the giant waste of taxpayer dollars that this constitutes. Look, I took Jewish studies courses when I was at UCLA. There are only two reasons that you take a Jewish studies course. The first is to meet girls, and the second is to get an easy A. And that's why most students are taking ethnic studies courses unless they're buying into this radical ideology that really is the basis of all ethnic studies courses throughout America.
Given this disparity, how can you argue that racism is not a driving factor in income inequality?
Because it has nothing to do with race and everything to do with culture. And when you have a culture that doesn't... You know what? Explain to me. You explain to me why black kids aren't graduating high school. Explain that one to me. Explain to me why black kids are shooting each other in rates significantly higher than whites are shooting each other. Explain to me why 13% of the population is responsible for 50% of the murder. Explain to me why the number of black kids in prison, not for innocent reasons, not for walking down the street and getting pulled into a prison, is so high. Explain, if it has nothing to do with culture, explain to me why the single motherhood rate in the black community jumped from 20% to 70% in the same course of time that the civil rights movement has made such tremendous strides. Is America more racist now than it was in 1960? And if it is, please explain to me how that happened. More deeply involved. As far as the institutional racism, all I would ask you to consider, you can believe what you want, but I would ask you to consider this. Shouting institutional racism does not actually combat racism. You have to find individual instances, and you have to show me who the racists are so that we can fight them together. I hate racism. I think it's evil. But if you're just going to say institutional racism every time something bad happens, there's no way to fight it. I need a policy that you're proposing, or I need a person who's actually racist so that we can fight it together, or we can determine whether the policy is good. What I find really problematic is the virtue signaling that I see by so many people on the other side, which is, I don't have to give you the racist, I don't have to tell you who he is or what measures I'm proposing. I just say institutional racism, everybody cheers for me because that's an approved point of view, and now we move on with our lives. You haven't helped anybody, you've just made yourself feel better.
We both know chromosomes don't necessarily mean you're male or female.
Gender.
With gender
identity. Go ahead. No, so
especially, but even so, you have a thing like Klinefelter's syndrome. So you don't know what you're talking about. You're not educated on genetics.
Would you like to discuss the genetics? Or
no,
what are your genetics?
So I'd stay away from the genetics and back to the brain scans.
You cut that out now, or you'll go home in an ambulance.
Yeah, that seems mildly inappropriate for a political discussion.
No, I know. Well, but wait, to be fair, but to be fair, you're actually being rude. And that's not fair.
I'm sorry, it's not rude to say that someone who's biologically a male is a male. Someone who's biologically male is a male.
But Mr. Shapiro, you knew very well that saying that to Zoe would be egregiously insulting.
It's not a matter of insulting or inflammatory.
It is. No, sir, you're right. On paper, what is a fact is a fact, and I can't deny that. But you knew that going in, that saying that to Zoe would be aggressively insulting.
It's not a matter of aggressively insulting.
It is.
The entire discussion is whether we are embracing mental illness and delusion as a society. That's the entire discussion. And let's get to what the left really wants here. And you say that you're for the Second Amendment.
Why is it about left or right? Because in Britain, this never is about left or right, this issue. Why is it here?
Well, we can talk about Britain in a second. I think the reason that it's about left and right here is because fundamentally, the right believes that the basis for the Second Amendment, and they believe in the Second Amendment, the basis for the Second Amendment is not really about self-defense and it's not about hunting. It is about resistance to government tyranny. That's what the founders said, and that's what the right believes in this country.
Which tyranny are you fearing yourself?
I fear the possibility of a tyranny rising in this country in the next 50 to 100 years. Let me tell you something, Piers. The fact that my grandparents and great-grandparents in Europe didn't fear that is why they are now ashes in Europe.